Hello my good friends, it's Drew here. Before we begin the video, I just wanted to briefly mention where I'm wanting to take the channel's content from here. I've always wanted to make a variety of content for this channel, and there will continue to be different types of uploads here and there, but I'm really wanting to just embrace the nitty-gritty of making more polished scripted videos like this, talking about my passions and gaming being at the top of that list. Speaking of gaming, it feels to me like we're living in a bit of a revival era. The old school is new again. The last Nintendo Direct alone had a slew of remakes, including Mario vs. Donkey Kong, more info on Super Mario RPG, and the absolute bombshell that was Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door. The entire Direct was honestly kind of mostly mid, until that very moment when the book appeared and the old music started playing. Getting announcements for 2 classic Mario RPGs in back-to-back directs that were once thought just impossible? It's kind of an amazing timeline for fans of that old style. I think it's a sign that Nintendo recognizes the demand for Mario to go back to his RPG roots. And hopefully future titles in Paper Mario and maybe even a proper Super Mario RPG sequel could take the concept even further into the modern age. I still think back to that crushing disappointment I had when Geno was showed as a Mii costume, almost exactly like he was in Smash 4. And I even made a video shortly after that describing my stubborn hope for the character, either in Smash or a possible remake, a hope that even I thought was just a little bit blind. I'm glad that out of some miracle that hope came true. Talking again about the Thousand-Year Door, I thought that Nintendo pretty much wanted to pretend the game didn't exist. As much as I still enjoyed Origami King, the mandates were clearly putting a stranglehold on the developers' creativity, who, to their credit, still did the darndest they could. Origami King is often very compelling with its storytelling, but I couldn't help but just wish for that variety and characterization that gave old Paper Mario a lot of that special flair. Going back to the Direct here, I did feel one thing was very noticeably absent, and that was the lack of any updates for classic games coming to Nintendo Switch Online. To be honest though, perhaps I expected too much of Nintendo, which has, for the most part, added titles to the service drip by drip via random announcements. But Nintendo actually broke that mold a little bit the previous 2 September Directs by announcing a whole slew of Nintendo 64 games, capped off with the surprise of a rare developed game. Then back in February, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance games were announced. I thought that maybe, just maybe, Nintendo was going to find its footing with a more consistent release schedule, with plenty of available titles still left to spare. But releases since then have continued to come at an absolute crawl. Nintendo has all but forgotten about the NES with 2 games announced this year. Nintendo 64 hasn't fared much better, with 4 games added to the service this year, with Mario Party 3 and 1080p snowboarding still languishing somewhere out there. The Sega Genesis, once Nintendo's rival console, has actually done better, with 8 games announced in 2 batches. Game Boy Advance hasn't really been as bad, especially with it just being announced this year. It's kind of still the honeymoon period. I'm looking forward still to games coming out there like Kirby and the Amazing Mirror, Golden Sun, some other great titles that are hopefully coming. Even with some great little announcements here and there, Nintendo is still vastly underutilizing its library of potential titles to bring to its legacy service. This slow feed of content is really making me long for the days of the Virtual Console. I remember feeling so excited every Wednesday when the new batch of classic and new games would be revealed on the Nintendo Wii Shop. Not every game was a winner. There are still plenty of games I didn't get when the shop closed back in 2019. In the end though, what I loved the most about it was the consistency. New games would be released, and I could choose whether I wanted to permanently own them. With Nintendo Switch Online, however, there is absolutely no consistency. Pay us $50 a year, and we'll continue to supply new games whenever the heck we feel like it. Which is sad because Nintendo has proven what kind of games they're capable of bringing. Banjo-Kazooie was once thought to be impossible due to being a Microsoft property. GoldenEye 007 is a licensing nightmare, but Nintendo did whatever was needed to help bring the game back for the first time in over 25 years. Heck, their most recent Game Boy Color announcement was Quest for Camelot, an obscure license game. Do you know how many other great licensed games Nintendo could bring to the service? Anyways, perhaps I'm being way too harsh. The current library of games is much better than when the expansion pack was announced over 2 years ago. The $50 a year is actually not a bad price for what is now currently available. All I'm saying is that Nintendo needs to implement a more consistent schedule, something that we can look forward to instead of vague yearly release windows or just no release windows at all. Retro's back on the menu, boys! I will say that if everything carries over to the Switch successor with even more legacy content added like DS games, I think the service will eventually have most every game I want. Hopefully. This is Drew, the Nostalgia Maniac, signing out.